I want to invite you, before you sit down, to open your Bibles to Romans chapter 15, and we will read together starting in verse 22. Romans 15, 22. This is the reason why I have so often been hindered from coming to you. But now, since I no longer have any room for work in these regions, and since I have longed for many years to come to you, I hope to see you in passing as I go to Spain, and to be helped on my journey there by you, once I have enjoyed your company for a while. At present, however, I'm going to Jerusalem, bringing aid to the saints, for Macedonia and Achaia have been pleased to make some contribution for the poor among the saints at Jerusalem. For they were pleased to do it, and indeed they owe it to them. For if the Gentiles have come to share in their spiritual blessings, they ought also to be of service to them in material blessings. When therefore I have completed this and have delivered to them what has been collected, I will leave for Spain by way of you. I know that when I come to you, I will come in the fullness of the blessing of Christ. You may be seated. Now I can say hi, and good to see you all. Now, our focus for today is this table and what it represents. Songs, scripture readings, what we do, and even preaching should lead us toward communion. Now, as you were listening to me reading all these geographical terms, Jerusalem, Achaia, Macedonia, Rome, Spain. Oh, I want to get to Spain. You got distracted probably. I haven't been to Spain. I haven't been to Rome. I want to go to Jerusalem. All these geographical movements. I want to go to Spain, but I'm going to Jerusalem. You guys in Rome. But Achaia is helping out, and you're like, how is this going to lead us here? Just pay attention, okay? At first, of course, the title for this sermon, Portrait of a True Missionary. It is about mission, but mission is primarily about Christ, and we're going to get there. But I want you to first kind of think about the word missionary. Some of you maybe are visitors and you haven't heard that word, missionary. I know there's some cities have Mission Boulevard, right? Where people drive. But that's pretty much all I know about mission. I've seen missions, like in Santa Barbara or Monterey, there are missions. But what are we talking about? A missionary. Well, thank you for asking this good question. We're going to answer that as we look at Paul, because he is one of the best pictures of missionary there is. So if you run into missionaries that just sit at home and really never preach the gospel, maybe it will change your view. But children, I haven't done assignments for you, so today is a challenge for you, children. By the end of the sermon, bring to me, or by the end of the service, bring to me your drawing of a portrait of a missionary. Now, don't bring me just a smiley face or sad face. You need to use all the points and all the information that we cover as we go through this passage. So there will be 4 points, and you need to incorporate all of that information in that portrait, that picture of a missionary that you need to draw. So, and there will be a reward, you know it. So if you haven't done it, children, this is the time to do it. Now, for the rest of you crowd, we're going to draw that picture in your mind, of course. So I will use or require you to really use your brains. And for me, I think this is the most important day for your brain in your week. Sunday in church, that's where your brain is on 130%. Your hard drive works hard. And some of you actually complain, you're forcing us to really think, and I cannot sleep for the next 3 days because my hard drive is so overloaded, it cannot slow down. I will try to break it into bits of information, so let's have it this way. Now, if you have read Matthew 28, the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus, before he goes up in heaven, he leaves his disciples and in their face all of us with assignment. And that assignment sounds very simple and very familiar to most of you. Go and make disciples of all, what? Nations, right? You know that. Now that's a command for all of us, for you and me. We need to go and make disciples of all nations. That being taken very seriously means that all of us, to some degree, are missionaries. Thank you for agreeing with that. You sign up by showing up here. You are a missionary now. Of course, we don't view ourselves as missionaries, but we are. Some of us in our lives will dedicate ourselves completely. You will give all of your life into missions. And maybe some of us will move to a different country and be a missionary, literally a missionary, relocating and bringing the gospel to people that don't know Christ. Some of us, I pray that will do that. The rest of us maybe will stay and will hold the rope for those who go by praying for them, by financially supporting, by maybe visiting, doing short-term, or investing somehow, supporting the work of missions around the globe. So all of us, to some degree, are missionaries. But this passage gives us a really good picture of a missionary. And so today we're going to walk through this passage and see 4 principles that every Christian missionary should be guided by, but what's more important, every Christian worker who is involved in ministry, any ministry you do, these principles that we see in Paul, and they will come across from this text very easily for us. These principles are applicable to everyone who is involved in ministry. So if you're involved in ministry, even if it's just opening the door and closing the door, these principles will be of great help for you. So let's walk through this. Chapter 15, verse 22 gives us first very important principle. I word it this way. Say no to good things for the sake of better things. How about that? Verse 22. This is the reason why I have so often been hindered from coming to you. So apparently, he wants to come to Rome. Who wants to go to Rome? I want to go to Rome. We should organize a missionary trip, right? There's so many people think of missions. I want to go to Spain, Hawaii. But he wants to get to Romans, and yet he says, I've been saying no to that visit. This is the reason why I have so often been hindered. So he's been hindered often. In other words, intention is there. I want to see you. We're living in a world of constant rush. I mean, everything is fast food right now. Everything is fast. Drive-through. Everything is drive-through. Even the church. Drive-through church. Everything. It needs to be quick, fast. We need to cover a lot. It's only one Sunday. It's only one day off. We need to get through everything. Get the church squared up, and we just on the run. Now, if you really pay attention to your own life, you have to admit that besides you getting busy and dizzy with that busy lifestyle, you also have to understand that you won't be able to cover everything in your life. For some of us, it means that we will never get to Rome. Unfortunately, I haven't been to Rome. I want to go to Rome. Someone says, I want to go. I'm desiring again to go to Rome. I've desired that last week and I desire it again. I want to go it might be that in my life I will never get to Spain, and you will not get everything covered in your life. Now, what was keeping Paul from coming to Roman believers, to the Roman believers? He wanted to have fellowship with them. He wanted to visit that church. He wants to serve them. But something is keeping. For this reason, I am hindered. What is that reason? Let's go back to verse 19 and 20. We covered last Sunday. This is the reason why he was not able to make it to Rome. This is the reason why he said no to Roman believers. By the power of signs, verse 19, and wonders, by the power of the Spirit of God, so that from Jerusalem all the way around to Illyricum, that's modern-day Yugoslavia, in Albania, I have fulfilled the ministry of the gospel of Christ. So I filled all that region, southern Eastern Europe, with the gospel of Christ. Verse 20. And thus I make it my ambition to preach the gospel, not where Christ has already been named, lest I build on someone else's foundation. So, what kept him from coming to Rome is the simple preaching of the gospel. He had a passionate desire to see the church, and we see that in verse 23, 24. He wants to see them. He wants to fellowship with them, but something is holding them back, mainly another ministry. This is the struggle of every person who is in ministry. When you're not involved in ministry, life is a lot easier. You just do regular things. Work, family, done. But when you get involved in ministry, suddenly all kinds of struggles come out. You need to wrestle with priorities. Should I give more? Should I give less? Where do I manage all of that? As soon as you make at least a little step toward ministry, the battle is on. You fight for priorities. And it's very good because ministry reveals to us that fight for priorities, that struggle for priorities. Ministries reveals what is more important and what's less important. Mission, specifically missions teaches us to say no to good things for the sake of better things. We all admire athletes who deny themselves, who say no to many, many things. Just think about it. A person who wants to participate in next Olympic Games, Summer Olympic Games, 4 years from now, they are already on a very strict diet. They're already strict. They're very strict on diet. If they work somewhere, they come home, and instead of laying on the couch, which is great thing to do, it's good thing to have a little pastry after work, right? And then laying on your couch just to relax for 30 minutes. Those who want to participate in Olympic Games 4 years from now, they say no to pastry, say no to rest on their couch. They grab the bike and do 50K. Why would you do that? Why would you deny yourself? If you want to compete in some kind of sport, it comes at the price. You say no to good things. You don't say no to bad things. That's easier to say. The struggle is when it's a good thing. Like, come on, laying on couch, taking a little day off, just relax. Who said it's bad? Nobody said it. It's good. But you say no to a good thing. Have you learned to say no to good things? Get involved in ministry, you'll learn that very quickly. Because it's going to demand from you to say no to certain luxuries, to certain preferences. They're not necessarily evil or bad. Have you learned to say no to good things for the sake of better things? Christianity has a lot to do with saying no to good things. The one that you're entitled and you can do it and nobody will say anything, but you say, you know what, I'm saying no. Like today, being at park right now. Who said it's bad? It's a good thing. But you said no and you came to church. And that's just a little speck of, but when you get involved in ministry like Paul, and he's torn apart. He wants to be in Spain. He wants to be in Rome. And he's hindered, held down by something more important. This is a struggle eternal struggle for everyone who is involved in ministry. And every time I'm meeting with someone who is involved in ministry, they're just pouring out their heart. I'm struggling. There's so many things. And we're praying and sorting things out and saying no to good things. Have you been involved in ministry to the point where you begin to say no to good things? If you haven't, maybe the ministry hasn't begotten yet. It's just a little something that doesn't cost you anything. So, say no to good things for the sake of better things. This is the essence of Christianity. This is the essence of every missionary work. You want to be a missionary? You will have to say no to good things. I want to challenge. Maybe this is very radical for some of you, but let me give you a simple scenario. A high schooler finishes high school. And the good thing is after high school is to do college, prepare yourself for career, enter career, and maybe marry and whatnot. And the person says no to a good thing in order to say yes for a year on the mission field. How about that? That's a radical. Oh, no. I cannot do this. Who said? It's not evil to go to prepare yourself for career, do college. But what if, a challenge for young people, you set it aside, say, no, half a year, 1 semester, I'm going to be involved. Maybe just here. There's so many opportunities in Sacramento, California, U.S. Go outside. We need to preach about it. Last Sunday, remember that one of the concluding points was that Paul was a single person. And he single-handedly turned upside down pretty much half the Europe. Why? He was single. Part of it, he was single. Of course, God has blessed him with gifts. God was on his team, of course, or he was on God's team. But he was single. We look at singleness as a disadvantage. There are normal people and then me, single person. No. Look at that as an opportunity. Maybe that's your advantage for the gospel. Don't wait and just learn to say no to good things. Maybe for a season. Just, hey, I'm going to take half a year off and I'm going to just focus on the work of the gospel. Number 2. Think globally, act locally. Think globally, act locally. Verse 19. Second half of it. So that from Jerusalem all the way around to Illyricum, I have fulfilled the ministry of the gospel of Christ. I told you, the modern day Yugoslavia, Albania, that's the area. So southeastern Europe and all the way from Palestine. Look at verse 23. For now, since I no longer have any room for work in these regions, I covered that. And since I have longed for many years to come to you, and that's Rome, the letter to Romans, right? So you, Romans, I want to be in Rome. I hope to see you in passing as I go to Spain. I see Spain. And to be helped on my journey there. And yet, he will go back to Jerusalem at this point. But the idea, I hope you see that Paul is thinking globally. He sleeps and he dreams of Spain, of Italy. Dream of Italy. We're probably having different kind of dreams. Mexico, Hawaii. He's thinking of the gospel where it's not proclaimed. Do you guys want to go to Spain? Do you see Spain? It's interesting. Spain was a very interesting place. Homeland for Seneca, a tutor for Nero. At that time, he was a very high official in Rome, and he was from Spain. It's an interesting country, very interesting country, intriguing country. And Paul wanted to bring the gospel there. The question for all of us, do we have this ability to see far, to see the world globally and understand and think of all sinners right now on this earth? Just think about in our minds. Think about all the sinners that live around the globe. Think of the gospel in regions. Think of the church all around the world. Not just this room, not just here, but kingdom of Christ globally. Paul is thinking that way. He is right now moving toward Jerusalem, but his mind, his thoughts include Rome, Spain. He's not limited by where he is. But I've seen the people, and this is very important to see here in Paul, that he thinks globally but acts locally. It's a very important balance. Because there are some people, and you've probably seen those dreamers. They just do nothing. They can't even tie their shoes. But they're thinking globally. I'm going to build empire. They're thinking big, but they're not able to even brush their teeth. You've seen those people. They're just inadequate with reality. They're just thinking globally, but there's no locality. They're just dreamers. You've seen those people. They're different. And the opposite of it would be people who just really don't see farther than their nose. They just focus on what's surrounding, and they don't even look up. Oh, I'm a different place. Oh, I'm in the middle of the highway. They just see immediately, and they're missing big picture. They go after the tree and they miss the big picture. Some go big and never see in front of them. There's an interesting passage that brings that balance in Proverbs 17:24. The discerning sets his face toward wisdom. Right there, toward wisdom. Here's the wisdom, the discerning just right here in the face. But the eyes of a fool are on the ends of the earth. So the fool is the one who doesn't see immediately how to apply wisdom in the context where that person lives, and they're just on the ends of the earth. Paul was a balance of both. He was thinking of Spain, Rome, Illyricum, Jerusalem, Achaia, Macedonia. He's thinking globally, acting locally. He was involved right now with a very interesting project, taking money to Jerusalem. Something very visible, something you can measure, something you do immediately. Right now, this is the collection, and I take this money and I'm bringing right here. He's acting locally, thinking globally. This is a missionary. If you don't have that ability to think big, stay here. Just stay here, that's okay. Missionaries, they think big. It's very important. But they are responsible for the immediate. And that's applicable to some degree to every ministry. I want to give you an example of Christ himself. He thinks globally, acts locally. Turn with me to Matthew 9. Gospel of Matthew, chapter 9. Here's Christ's perfect example. In chapter 9, verse 36. That's Christ. And his vision, he has a global vision. When he saw crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. He sees they're spread, there's no shepherd, and he sees big picture. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful. He looks to the globe and says, oh, it's big. The harvest is plentiful. He thinks big. He's thinking globally. But laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into harvest. He's talking about mission field. He says, we need to send missionaries. It's a big, big field. Verse 1 of chapter 10. There's no break, right? Thought continues. And he called to him his 12 disciples. And then he gives the list, verse 2, 3. He gives the list of those disciples. Verse 5, these disciples Jesus sent out, instructing them, go. So he is thinking globally. Harvest is plentiful. Sheep are scattered. We need to reach them. And he acts locally. Here's 12 people, specific names, specific instruction. He works locally. This is a missionary example Do you see the world around you as a great field ready for the gospel, and yet you act faithfully where you are? Then you're moving in the right direction. This is very helpful for you parents. Because some parents are I just need to fix this bed, get the homework done, and I'm done. No. Don't put yourself in that box, please. Think globally. You are raising next missionary. You're raising a pastor. You're raising a CEO. You're raising someone who will work for the gospel, who will bless the church. Think big, that you are investing in something big. Don't just end it with a little table, little bed prepared. Now, some of you are dreamers. You're just like, my son is going to be CEO, and you are not even helping him do the homework. That's a problem as well. Get busy with immediate responsibilities. But please, parents, Sunday school teachers, you need to see globally. You have 15 children. Who are they going to become? Have a Spain in view. Have a Rome in view. Don't just limit yourself to a little, just get this class covered and done. No. You need to see farther. That's a mission mindset. And that's the heart of the gospel. That's the heart of Christ. That's the heart of Paul. He is doing immediate financial help of one church to another, and yet he is thinking of Spain. Have you learned? Think globally, act locally. Number 3, love the church. You knew it's going to come. Love the church. Let's read this next portion. 15:24. I hope to see you in passing as I go to Spain, and to be helped on my journey there by you once I have enjoyed your company for a while. How the love toward church is expressed, number 1, it's expressed in hunger for fellowship. I call it hunger for the fellowship of the church. You love the church? If you love the church, you want to be there. You want to see them. You want to fellowship with them. And Paul says, listen, guys, I want to enjoy your company for a while. You know the problem of a lot of missionaries that I run into? They don't love the church. They don't love the church. It's a serious problem on the mission field. They love programs. They love events. They don't love the church. And that's the problem. Paul wants to reach Spain, but he loves believers in Rome. A lot of missionaries look at the church as a stepping stone. Just step on it, and we're going to reach something great. Spain. Wait a minute. If you get to Spain and you preach the gospel, what's the end work? What's the end result of that ministry? Church is founded. Church planting is the end goal. So it ends with the church. How can you look at the church as a stepping stone? Because it actually will lead to the church. Founded in Spain and Rome, Illyricum, Jerusalem, Antioch, Macedonia, Achaia, everywhere. The church is the end goal. So the missions are not, missionary work is not to use the church to fulfill their programs, but missionary programs are to be used for the good of the church. And Paul is saying, listen guys, I love the church and I long your company. I want to enjoy that company. The ultimate goal of every missionary work is founding the new church. Church planting. That's the end goal. The church is founded. That's what Christ said. I want to invite you to a well-known passage in Matthew. After Peter confesses Jesus to be the Son of God, the promised Messiah, Christ, Jesus says this. He said to them, but who do they say that I am? Simon Peter replied, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you're Peter, and on this rock I will build my missionary work. Right? Is that what you have in your Bible? No, not in my Bible. I will build my church. My church. Jesus says, I will build my church. That's the end goal. So if you have not underlined that word, this is very important because this is the first time in the New Testament and in the Bible we get to the word church. I will build my church. Listen, this is not optional. If you want to be involved in ministry, if you want to be involved in mission work, the love of the church and hunger for the fellowship is a must. No exception. Now, having said that, there is a little addition to that. Look at verse 24. Beautiful. Reading verse 24, we understand he wants to see them. I hope to see you in passing and have enjoyed your company. But as I go to Spain and to be helped out on my journey there by you. Now, if you are paying attention to what he's trying to communicate, he's saying, listen, fellowship with you, to see you, and also I'm slightly expecting something from you. I'm expecting a help as I go to Spain. Now, this help is part of hospitality. If you were here on Thursday, we are studying 3 John, and that letter of 3 John is about hospitality. And the word he's using in verse 6, and I want to read that, is the same word he's using here to be helped out on the journey to Spain. I want to read that for you, for all of us. 3 John verse 6. Who testified to your love before the church, you will do well to send them on their journey in a manner worthy of God. Now, sending someone on their journey doesn't mean, guys, it's time for you to go to Spain. Okay, please, let's have a picture taken next to our garage, a message. Time for you to leave. That's not how people would send missionaries at that time. This word is used to describe the hospitality of the Eastern and the time, cultural context of that time. So Romans, Greeks, everyone, when they send someone on their journey, they're not just feeding them right there and say, hope you make it to Spain. Paul, goodbye. They are sending him, meaning they equip and provide everything so that he makes it all the way to Spain. They provide money, they provide food, they provide everything that he needs to get to Spain. That's a hospitality 101. That's not just our hospitality. Our hospitality, maximum a little bit of tea or coffee. Maybe I'll get the pastry. Maybe if you really press, I'll do 2 pastries for you. For them, they would host them for a week. They would prepare everything, and then they would give money, food, and make sure they make it all the way to their destination. That's what he's describing here. And now I want to transfer that in our context, because fellowship and learning to see and enjoy company is joined by that hospitality. Hospitality is part of it. We have ushers. We have comfortable AC seating here, and we fellowship with one another. It's just a little speck of that hospitality. It goes further when you open your house to host people who work for the gospel. A challenge, guys, really challenge for all of us. Would you open your house to host missionaries, those who are involved in the gospel? Would you support those who do the work of the gospel? Fellowship is part of that, or hospitality is part of the fellowship. Another way love toward their church is expressed is in investing in the church. Invest in the church. So first, hunger for fellowship, that's verse 24. But then verse 25 and on, he describes investing in the church. Look at that. At present, however, even though I want to get to Spain, to you guys in Rome, at present, however, I am going to Jerusalem. Even though I preached already from Jerusalem all the way to Yugoslavia, I covered that area, I am going back to Jerusalem, bringing aid to the saints. for Macedonia and Achaia. Now, Macedonia, that's northern Greece, and Achaia is actually Greece. So the letter to Corinthians is a letter to Achaean church. Athens, Corinth were part of Achaia. Philippi and Thessalonica would be part of Macedonia, if you want to connect the letters in the New Testament. Some of them were written to Macedonian believers, some of them to Achaia, to believers in Achaia. Have been pleased. So Macedonia and Achaia have been pleased to make some contribution for the poor among the saints in Jerusalem. For they were pleased to do it, and indeed they owe it to them. For if the Gentiles have come to share in their spiritual blessings, they ought also to be of service to them in material blessings. Then, when therefore I have completed this and have delivered to them what has been collected, I will leave for Spain by way of you. Interesting. As I mentioned, that he thinks globally but acts locally. Literally, he grabs the money and delivers it to Jerusalem. It's about financial care. Jerusalem church is in need, and Paul learned of that. So it's a little context. The church in Jerusalem financially struggles right now. Paul is in a mission field. He is preaching the gospel from Jerusalem all the way to Illyricum. He's somewhere southern Europe. And he learns of the need in Jerusalem. He takes it personal, says, guys in Jerusalem, they've been blessing us. They are the beginning of our movement. This is where Christ lived. This is where the pillars of the church are, Peter and the rest. I need to help them out. How? He says, well, I'm going to do fundraising, a little fundraising project. And so he goes from churches to churches and sends letters. He writes to Macedonian believers. He writes to Greece. He says, guys, would you just join me in helping Jerusalem? It's very easy. Why we're describing this in detail? Very interesting. Because this sets back Paul on his desire to get to Rome and to Spain. His mission and global thinking and calling in life is to reach the unreached. He already shared that. Now he puts that on pause and takes money and goes back to Jerusalem. Paul, we get ushers, deacons. They can do it, faithful people. You have people that can help you. Why would you do this? Here is the principle, very important, that he communicates here. This is the natural law of attaching your heart to the church. Hear how it goes. Jesus worded beautifully in Matthew 6:21. Just write it down. 6:21. Matthew 6:21. Jesus said, where your treasure is, there your what? Heart will be also. Where your treasure. So imagine you are coming to me and say, hey, I have a spare $1 million. That's very easy for you to imagine. You come to me and say, hey, I need financial advice. Pastor, I wouldn't recommend asking my advice for financial investments, but let's say imagine, it's still imaginary. Okay, you have $1 million and I can give you really good financial advice. So you come with $1 million and say, hey, invest in this company, buy these bonds. And you just trust me so well that you just go and spend $1 million and invest in that company. Again, please don't try it at home. But you do that, okay? Now, $1 million question. A day after, on the morning of a day after you invest everything, tell me, what are you going to do first thing in the morning? You're going to run to internet and check the stock market. You're going to find your company and see how your company is doing. You're going to study the market dynamic. You're going to learn everything about that company. And imagine that you have that investment for 5 years. After 5 years, I am more than sure that you will know everything about that company, about that CEO, where they live, and what they eat for lunch. You're gonna know everything about that company and about people and stock market and everything. Why? Because you're $1 million in it. You see, your heart followed the treasure. You put treasure there, eventually your heart catches up with that. It's always like that. It's always like that. Now what Paul is saying, listen, I took time, energy, emotions, even my own money to invest, to send letters, to visit churches, do fundraising. I invest everything, time, energy, emotions, money, in raising funds for Jerusalem. So much so that now where my treasure is, my heart is there, and therefore I'm putting on hold Spain, Romans, you guys, hi, wait for me. My heart is in Jerusalem right now. My calling in life is to reach out the unreached, and I'm putting on pause because my heart is in Jerusalem right now. I'm sorry, guys. My heart is there. Paul, you can send Titus. You have Timothy. You have good guys that can carry money. They're responsible. They know how to do things. I know. I'm going to do it myself. Paul, my heart is there. My heart is there. Some of the people come to church with less excitement, let's say it this way. Maybe you even forced yourself to come. And if you're honest, sometimes you don't feel like going to church. And like, how can I make myself be excited about the church? This is the principle that really should direct us and change from inside. Very simple. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And I'm not talking about just money. I'm talking about your time, energies, your thoughts, your emotions, and your money. Everything, when you give and you place it somewhere, eventually your heart catches up with that. This is Paul's example. Let me give you a couple passages that he does this fundraising. And he mentioned here, right? He mentioned two regions. He mentioned Macedonia, verse 26, and Achaia. Now, let's get to that Macedonia. That's very interesting. There are two chapters in the New Testament that deal with financial contribution and collections and fundraising in the most vivid way. This is the best teaching in the New Testament on giving, period. And it's found in 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and 9. Now, I just want to read how he does this fundraising. Very fascinating. So he knows that Jerusalem is in need. He is willing to invest his time, energy, his own money to do fundraising so that people can contribute and help the needy. Verse 1, chapter 8 of 2 Corinthians. We want you to know, brothers, so he's writing to Corinthians, that's Greece, that's Achaia. So brothers, about the grace of God that has been given among the churches in Macedonia, that's northern Greece. He says, hey, northern Greece, they have grace. For in severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. Oh, they're very generous. Fundraising went great. For they gave according to their means, as I can testify, and beyond their means of their own accord, begging us earnestly for the favor of taking part in the relief of the saints. That's the Jerusalem saints, and they need relief. And this, not as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord, and then by the will of God to us. Accordingly, we urge Titus that that as he started, so he would complete among you this act of grace. But as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in all earnestness, in our love for you, see that you excel in this act of grace also. I say this not as a command, but to prove by the earnestness of others, Macedonians, that your love also is genuine. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that by his poverty might become rich, so that by his poverty you become rich. Now he continues on, no time to read chapter 8, but then in chapter 9, I want to read a few verses from there. Now, verse 1. It is superfluous for me to write to you about the ministry of the saints. For I know your readiness, of which I boast about you to the people of Macedonia. Wait a minute. Paul is a very good politician. He says, listen, you Macedonians, saying that Achaia has been ready since last year, and your zeal has stirred up most of them. Beautiful. He says, Macedonians, Achaia is so zealous, you got to catch up with them. He turns to Macedonians and Macedonians, or Achaia now, you guys, Macedonians are so great in giving. And that's what happens every time you come to church. We steer one another. Today, you steer me to give more. Next Sunday, I steer you to give more. And that's normal. But what's important, Paul is helping the church to link their heart with the need of others. Now he faced that pain of that dilemma so vividly here. He has the calling and he says, I want to get to Spain, to you Romans. Now I'm grabbing this money because my heart is there. I invest so much energy and time, I'm going back against the flow, against the current that I have created myself with evangelism in that region. And I'm already covered. There's no space for me. There's no room for me to preach the gospel. It's all covered. But I'm going back to what's covered. Why? My heart is with believers in Jerusalem. Do you prioritize the church? It will be visible in your hunger for fellowship. It will be visible in investments that you make. Time. Sometimes for some of us, it's literally time. For some of us, energy, effort, thoughts, money. Eventually, your heart will be as well. Your heart will follow your treasure. What your treasure is, your heart will also be. Fourth important principle, evangelize believers and disciple unbelievers. You've heard me right. Evangelize believers and disciple unbelievers. Verse 29. I know that when I come to you, I will come in the fullness of the blessing of Christ. That phrase communicates, some translations even went further, with the blessing of the gospel of Christ. And the meaning is that he's going to come, he's going to preach Christ, he's going to bring Christ to them, he's going to evangelize them. Very interesting. This idea I take from Paul, but the wording I took from the book by John Leonard, Get Real. He has one chapter that named exactly the same way. Evangelize believers and disciple unbelievers. You see, we normally think that we evangelize whom? Unbelievers. And when they come to church, to faith, we say, now let's do a little bit of discipleship. He takes this upside down and says, no. I'm going to evangelize believers and I'm going to disciple unbelievers. I hope it creates a little tension in your mind. No. This is stretching my mind. I cannot really fully agree with this. Okay, thank you for honest answer. But don't you see in verse 29 that he wants to bring and bless them with Christ? He wants to bring Christ and preach Christ and the gospel to believers in Rome. He has mentioned that in Romans chapter 1 verse 15. So this is not a new idea. It's backed up by chapter 1. Look at verse 15. Romans 1:15. So I, Paul, am eager to preach the gospel to you also who are in Rome. To you meaning church. So guys, I'm going to come and I'm going to evangelize you, believers, the church. And he comes back to this at the end of chapter 15 and he mentions that I want to come to you with the full blessing of Christ. I want to preach Christ. So Paul is bringing something very unique, something under the surface, and it's hidden in many churches and they're not even sensing that. It's called Galatian problem. Galatian problem. How it begins. The church initially makes that wrong decision that we're going to preach the gospel to unbelievers and then we're going to teach on discipleship and the life for Christ to believers. They just split these two. Even though originally in the New Testament it's one piece, but they divide it. And so to unbelievers, we're going to preach the gospel. The gospel includes God's holiness. The gospel includes man's sinfulness. Everyone has broken God's law. The gospel includes Christ, and the cross of Christ connects this gap between sinners and holy God, and there's no connection, and the cross comes as a bridge. Cross of Christ is a solution, and people who trust in Christ's perfect work receive forgiveness of sins and have access all the way to holy God. We say, oh, that's for unbelievers. We don't do that for believers. For believers, we press on responsibilities. You guys need to love one another. You need to give. You need to do. You need to do. You need to do. You need to do. Don't do. And we just focus on what their responsibility is with good intentions. It robs believers of the gospel because that contains grace. And grace is withheld from believers, and we just give it to unbelievers. And believers become harsh, judgmental, unforgiving, because there's no grace. We're keeping away Christ and forgiveness and grace from this and just give it to unbelievers. And so what happens, that church becomes judgmental, religious, ritualistic, and there's no grace. And Paul knows that. There's that tendency, that was that tendency 2,000 years ago. And he says, Christ is the one that I'm going to preach when I come to you, Christ, believers in Rome. So we're not pressing on the sense of your responsibility, a duty, and the guilt trip. We need to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ to believers. And when we preach the whole counsel of God, when we preach the whole Bible, something happens what Jesus mentioned in Luke chapter 24, verse 44. Luke 24, 44. This is what happens when we preach without splitting the two. We preach everything to believers and to unbelievers. This is what happens. Then he said to them, "These are my words," Jesus speaking, "that I spoke to you while I was still with you, that everything written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled." So everything. So all those parts of the Bible point to Christ. When we preach Christ, we preach grace. When we preach grace, believers become beautiful and attractive. So Paul, knowing this, he says, believers in Rome, I'm going to come and I'm going to preach to you the gospel, full of Christ, fullness of Christ. Why? I want you to be attractive. I want you to be full of grace. I want you to be beautiful. Then your question is, okay, we got the first part. So evangelize believers. We need to bring the gospel. What about unbelievers? We need to disciple unbelievers. Well, simple question. When did 12 disciples of Jesus, follow along, when did 12 disciples of Jesus become believers? When? Nobody knows. All commentators break their necks. Was it the first week when they were with Christ, or the last week, or in the middle, or during that miracle, or during that miracle, or during Sermon on the Mount, or right after Sermon on the Mount? When did disciples begin to turn to be believers? Nobody knows. We all know one factor. Jesus took simple fishermen that didn't believe. And very strange crowd. Some of them tax collectors, just really strange zealots. And he grabbed a very interesting group of people. Strangers. He took them all and discipled them for 3.5 years. And after 3.5 years of discipleship, they all but one went and died martyrs' death. They all sacrificed themselves. They were preaching the gospel with conviction, and they were willing to pay the price for that. And you say, when did that happen? We don't know. Because he took unbelievers and discipled them into heaven. When Jesus, in Matthew 28, goes up to heaven, right before, he says, disciples, here's the assignment for you. Go and make believers of all nations. Is that how he mentioned the commitment? No. You go to unbeliever nations and make disciples of those nations. Oh, I thought I just need to get the converts. I just need numbers. Here's numbers. These people believed. Done. No. Jesus says, no. We make disciples. You go and live with them for 3.5 years. This is why God placed you on that street, to disciple those people for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. This is why you are at work where you are, to disciple people into the kingdom. Don't look at that just you drop the bomb. Generally, this is what the New Testament is teaching. There are guys like Paul who goes from city to city planting the church, but he is called to be a missionary and apostle. Very few of us will go and somewhere remotely just keep preaching. That's a special gift, special calling. The rest, majority of us are missionaries there where we are. And so that's the calling for all of us. How often do we speak the gospel to each other, my friends? How often do you speak the gospel and we're embarrassed? Oh, no. I'm going to mention Christ only to unbelievers. No. We all need the gospel. You need the gospel. I need the gospel. This is why communion. We partake every month. Why? What is communion? Let's begin very simple. It's to what? Proclaim that Christ died for our sins. Wait a minute, I know that already. I'm done with this. Why do I need this? Because believers constantly need the gospel. This is the gospel, preaching the gospel to one another. This is why we partake in communion.